Army veteran who drove a pickup truck into a crowd celebrating the new year in New Orleans, killing 15 people, posted online that his acts were inspired by the Islamic State. The Vice President for Habitat for Humanity International Africa Region Office talks to VOA about Jimmy Carter's legacy as a champion for affordable housing. And analysts say President-elect Donald Trump's selection for the nation's top law enforcement office may face tough questions over ethics and lobbying. All this and much more coming up on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with the heinous New Year's Day terror attack in the southern city of New Orleans. A U.S. Army veteran flying an ISIS flag from his truck swerved around makeshift barriers and drove into the city's crowded French Quarter. Officials says 15 people were killed and at least 30 were injured. The FBI has identified the driver as Shamsuddin Jabbar, age 42. Jabbar was killed by police after he exited the truck and opened fire on responding officers, according to the New Orleans Police Superintendent Ann Kirkpatrick. 3 officers returned fire. President Joe Biden spoke about the tragedy.
The FBI is leading the investigation to determine what happened, why it happened, and whether there was any continuing threat to public safety. Here's what we know so far. The FBI has reported to me the killer was an American citizen, born in Texas. He served in the United States Army on active duty for many years. He also served in the Army Reserve until a few years ago. The FBI also reported to me that mere hours before the attack, he posted videos on social media indicating that he was inspired by ISIS, expressing a desire to kill. The ISIS flag was found in his vehicle, which he rented to conduct this attack. Possible explosives were found in the vehicle as well, and more explosives were found nearby. The situation is very fluid, and the investigation has a preliminary stage. The law enforcement and intelligence community are continuing to look for any connections, associations, or co-conspirators. We have nothing additional to report at this time. The investigation is continuing to be active, and no one should jump to conclusions. Additionally, we're tracking the explosion of a cyber truck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. Law enforcement and the intelligence community are investigating this as well.
The FBI is taking the lead in this investigation. Authorities recovered a handgun and an AR-style rifle, according to a law enforcement official who was not authorized to discuss the investigation publicly and spoke on condition of anonymity. Aletha Duncan, the FBI Assistant Special Agent in charge of the investigation, offered more specifics on the incident.
The subject has been identified as 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar, a U.S.-born citizen from Texas. He was driving a Ford pickup truck, which appears to be rented, and we are working to confirm how the subject became in possession of this vehicle. An ISIS flag was located on the trailer hitch of the vehicle, and the FBI is working to determine the subject's potential associations and affiliations with terrorist organizations. Weapons and potential improvised explosive devices, IEDs, were located in the subject's vehicle. Other potential IEDs were also located in the French Quarter. As of now, 2 IEDs have been found and rendered safe. We are working with our partners to investigate this as an act of terrorism. We're aggressively running down all of the leads to identify the possible subject's associates. We're working to ensure that there is no further threat. We do not believe that Jabbar was solely responsible. We are aggressively running down every lead, including those of his known associates.
Pope Francis was saddened to learn of the attack in New Orleans and says he is spiritually close to the city. Separately, Italian President Sergio Mattarella also sent condolences to President Joe Biden, whom he will see during his visit in Rome next week, saying all of Italy is mourning the loss of life. Nola Haynes, a native of New Orleans and a political scientist at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, told VOA's Carol Van Dam that she has been warning of increased terrorist threats both inside the U.S. and elsewhere for some time. She describes her personal reaction to the attack.
So mostly what you're going to find, especially in the French Quarter, especially on Bourbon Street, are tourists. You're going to find young folks, and so far, unfortunately, the information that we're getting, the names that we're getting, so far they are young folks, and so far they are tourists, and that's what's so unfortunate about this situation. And then also another point is there are people who actually prefer to go to New Orleans for New Year's versus, say, a Mardi Gras. Mardi Gras might be too overwhelming. New Year's Eve could be something a little bit more reasonable. I love New Orleans actually for New Year's Eve for that reason, because it's more manageable than Mardi Gras or Essence Fest, Jazz Fest. And so I'm just heartbroken. I'm heartbroken for the victims and their families, my city. We have been through so much. And I just, waking up to this news was just awful and horrendous.
And when you say that, I know you're not saying it, but you're thinking about Hurricane Katrina too, in the aftermath.
I am thinking about Katrina and everything that's happened since then, the spikes in violence, and the way that a lot of Native folks have transitioned out of the city. I mean, sometimes I go home and I don't recognize it. Sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad, but New Orleans has not been the same since Katrina. And I don't know what this is going to do to tourism. People just simply might be afraid to be in open areas where they can be victimized in this sort of brutal and horrific way.
As somebody who monitors terror threats in this country, in Africa, and elsewhere, you sit on an international panel that does that. What are your thoughts on the attacker, who authorities say may have had contact with terrorist groups?
I mean, listen, the awful truth is that if global terrorism is spiking, it's not hard to imagine that domestic terrorism is also spiking. In fact, last year, the FBI issued a warning about that very fact. And I tried my best to warn people that, hey, listen, if this is something the FBI is keeping an eye on and they're going public about it, this is very serious. And we saw what just happened in Germany. The fact that, ISIS is trying to take advantage of the power vacuum in Syria. They have strongholds in at least 4 to 6 countries in Africa. And the fact that they may have some homegrown or some radicalized folks here in the United States does not surprise me.
That was Nola Haynes, political scientist at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service, a member of an International Security Advisory Board, and a New Orleans native. She was speaking with my colleague, Carol Van Dam. Turning now to the legacy of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who died on Sunday at 100 years old. Habitat for Humanity is a nonprofit organization dedicated to affordable housing for those who need it most. It began in 1976 in the United States and is now in 70 countries worldwide, including 9 in Africa. However, with the death of President Carter, it has lost one of its most valuable activists and strongest voices for the organization that he joined in 1984. Ruder Kayombo, the area vice president for Habitat for Humanity International for the Africa Area Office, spoke with VOA's Philip Alexio about the loss of President Carter.
Well, I just look at the impact and the legacy that he leaves. He was a man who not only built, but he also contributed to mobilizing volunteers to build housing. And based on the gap in affordable housing, it's not going to be possible to meet that affordable housing gap. So the work of volunteers, the work of governments across the world is very important.
Did you ever have a chance to meet him?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't meet him, but some of my colleagues did. In fact, our current national director in South Africa volunteered at a build in Durban in 2002 where President Jimmy Carter participated. And it was very notable because his participation in South Africa was not only because it was a Habitat for Humanity build, but it was a sign of the commitment to deal with the inequalities that had plagued that country, including in the area of access to affordable housing.
And what has been the reaction of the people who work for Habitat and who are involved? What have they said about his loss?
I spoke to the board chair of Habitat for Humanity Zambia yesterday, and he said that we've lost a significant and a great person who brought the world together to focus on the need to meet the affordable housing gap. And he recognized these efforts because he was known to be a humanitarian. He was a Nobel Peace Prize winner. That is a very notable impact. And most of his impact was post his time as president. He did more, I believe, for the world outside the White House, although he did some work within the White House. He reached far and wide outside the US. So the convergence in values is what brought together this marriage between President Jimmy Carter and his wife, Rosalind. And between 1984 and 2019, when he last went on site, he was involved in over 37 sites, including some that were multiple countries in Asia. So probably about 40 sites where he physically was available to contribute.
January 9th at the National Cathedral in Washington, there will be a memorial service for the former president. Will there be anything going on over there in that part of the world?
Well, you know that Habitat for Humanity International is actually made up of independent, locally run affiliates. And we have a plan to make sure that in a number of the affiliates across North America, across Africa, Asia, and Europe, there will be services that will honor and recognize his work so that we can join with the people of the United States to recognize the reach of his impact and the legacy that he has left. Yes, we will honor him. Yes, we'll continue to speak of the great work that he began, and we will continue to do, remembering that one person, when they put their hands and their commitment and their voice behind a worthy issue, they can make a global impact. We hope to continue inspiring action as we give the example that he and his wife set for the world at large.
What are your personal thoughts about former President Jimmy Carter?
My personal thoughts, Philip, are that as a person of faith, I take my hat off to a man who was a leader, who was a man of faith, who put his Christian faith in action in terms of what he did, what he said, and how he influenced others to make an impact. So I hope that more Christians, more people of faith, multi-faith, will be able to know that their faith must amount to making the difference because he set a great example. And I believe the Lord rewarded him with a long life.
That was Rudo Kayombo with Habitat for Humanity International. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is choosing some of his strongest supporters to be members of his cabinet. However, his selection for the nation's top law enforcement may face some tough questions over ethics and lobbying. VOA senior Washington correspondent Carolyn Presutti introduces us to Pam Bondi.
Prior to being Attorney General of Florida, I was a career prosecutor for 18 years.
Pam Bondi is best known as the first female Attorney General of Florida, the home state of Mar-a-Lago, which is the home of President-elect Donald Trump. Here's what Bondi told VOA in 2012 when she was first elected.
All I want to be is Attorney General. That's it. That's what I'm focused on. I'm very determined. I'm driven. I'm a prosecutor.
Bondi spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2016 when Donald Trump was the party's presidential nominee 3 months before he won the presidency.
I know Donald, and I am proud to know Donald. Our votes are being suppressed.
As staunch loyalist, Bondi supported the false notion that Trump won the 2020 election. She was also on Trump's legal team during his first impeachment trial.
Joe Biden was the point man for Ukraine.
Along with other Republicans, Bondi spoke in support of the president-elect at his hush money trial in New York, when he was found guilty of 34 felony counts.
Hi, everyone. Great meetings. Looking forward to seeing Senator Graham.
In early December, Bondi visited Capitol Hill, lobbying legislators in advance of her Senate confirmation hearing for Attorney General.
I want to make sure that we restore the reputation of these agencies, these departments like the FBI and the Department of Justice and the intelligence community, that we restore their reputation as non-political institutions.
Analysts say her lack of independence from the White House is a valid matter of concern.
There will be times, I think it is an absolute certainty, given the degree to which Mr. Trump is trying to push the envelope on so many legal fronts, where fidelity to law and fidelity to Trump will be in tension. And that is going to be a crucible for Pam Bondi to deal with.
One of her conflicts is that in 2013, her office decided not to formally investigate fraud claims regarding Trump University.
But the Florida Ethics Commission found no violation on her part.
Somebody that has always been there, former Florida Attorney General. She could have anything she wanted, by the way.
Bondi is currently with Ballard Partners, a Washington, D.C. lobbying firm. Analysts say senators will also ask about her high-profile clients, who could be plaintiffs before her as Attorney General. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Washington.
Like many of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks, his choice to head the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, has been a major supporter and a campaign donor. And for much of her career, she helped lead the world's wrestling entertainment conglomerate. Despite what many analysts and educators see as her limited experience in education, big shifts and focus are expected under her leadership. VOA's Laura Bowman explains.
During President-elect Donald Trump's first term as president, Linda McMahon led the U.S. Small Business Administration. Trump's choice for the Department of Education chief has served as a board member at a private college and briefly on a state board of education. Some analysts are worried.
She certainly doesn't have much relevant experience in education, either at the K-12 or higher education level, relative to previous education secretaries.
But many conservative analysts say she'll do well at streamlining the department and limiting its authority, which is what they want.
The Department of Education does not need to be run by an educator. I believe we do need an experienced executive, someone who knows how to manage people, get things done, hold people accountable, understand results and reporting of results.
The department's responsibilities include managing federal student loan and grant programs for higher education, overseeing civil rights, and distributing funds for low-income students. Some educators worry public education will be at risk under a Trump administration and that the most vulnerable students will suffer.
Students with disabilities are LGBTQ plus students, are Black, Brown, and Indigenous students, are students living in poverty, making higher education even more expensive and further out of the reach of middle-class families.
Many conservatives say the department is bureaucratic and ineffective and should be abolished entirely. That's not likely, but change is coming, say analysts from both sides of the political aisle.
What I see happening over the next 4 years is really a slimming down of the department substantially and really getting the federal government out of the business of education as much as possible.
Incoming Trump administration, I think, believes in cutting back a lot of the federal funding across all programs.
Both sides may agree on promoting technical education as an alternative to a traditional university.
What a lot of high school graduates, what a lot of workers want, is less a four-year college degree and more the kind of training that's going to help them get better jobs, that's going to help them have more successful lives. Right now, it can be really difficult to use a lot of federal support for higher education at some of these programs.
A Republican-led education department can also be expected to attempt rolling back policies promoted by current President Joe Biden, such as protections for transgender students.
The department has weighed in very heavily on gender disputes in America's schools, encouraging them to adopt policies which emphasize gender rather than biological sex. I think a Trump administration is likely to sharply reverse directions on all of this.
McMahon will need to be approved by the Senate. Analysts expect she will be, with a Republican majority and more controversial cabinet picks for them to consider. Laurel Bowman, VOA News, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all of our VOA Africa programs on VOA's website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, we'll tell you what's being done to give U.S. military veterans a second chance. A famous author once wrote, "A vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. A vision with action can change the world." As we begin a new year, let us come together on the next episode of Our Voices to explore the power of using a vision board to achieve our goals in 2025. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices. In other news, Kenyan President William Ruto is acknowledging abuses by Kenyan security forces in the wake of demonstrations against a recent wave of alleged kidnappings that sparked outrage in the country. Security forces in Kenya have been accused of carrying out dozens of illegal detentions since youth-led anti-government demonstrations last summer were harshly repressed. The death penalty has been abolished in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa, who had not signed the death warrants for those facing capital sentence since he had come to power in 2017, signed the death penalty abolition bill into law on December 31st, according to presidential spokesman George Charamba. And 27 migrants from sub-Saharan African countries, including women and children, are dead after two boats capsized off the coast of central Tunisia, according to the local civil defense official. 83 people were rescued. Both the dead and rescued passengers were trying to reach Europe. The Tournament of Roses Parade is an annual U.S. New Year's Day tradition with lavishly decorated floats brightening the streets of Los Angeles. Jeannie Dulot shows us a float highlighting efforts to give military veterans second careers in computer coding and cybersecurity.
This 136th annual Tournament of Roses parade has nearly 40 moving platforms decorated with fresh flowers, including the float Coding for Veterans, highlighting training for retired military service members in software engineering and cybersecurity. Terry Rivera served 6 years in the U.S. Navy before joining the New York Fire Department. He says damage to his lungs from responding to the 2001 terrorist attack on the World Trade Center forced him into disability retirement. After working in emergency management and disaster relief, Rivera joined the Coding for Veterans program last year.
I strongly believe that the next, and it's been depicted in a lot of movies, but the next 9/11 scale, bigger, will probably be a cyber attack. So that was got me interested. Hopefully I can help prevent that from happening.
Coding for Veterans originated in Canada and is run here in Los Angeles through the University of Southern California. Executive Director Jeff Musson says they have high job placement rates and more than 800 veterans currently enrolled.
You go from serving on the battlefield to now serving in cyberspace. And when you look at the soft skills of people in the military, attention to detail, leadership, teamwork, those are the skills that employers are really looking for.
The online program is self-paced, can be completed in 6 to 12 months, and includes career coaching, says Terry Wolf of the USC's Marshall School of Business.
How to put together your resume, how to do a job search, how to get effective coaching in terms of helping you to track in terms of your career interest in career development, how to develop a LinkedIn profile. Some very basic tools that if you're coming out of the military for 20 years, you would never know. You would never have had the need for any of that.
Alejandra Rodriguez volunteered to help decorate the float because of her family's military background.
I saw the difficulty transitioning. They did have PTSD. They did struggle. They saw a lot. My sister did 2 tours, and I'm going to cry, and she came back different. And it was very difficult as a family, I think, to see her struggle. And at the time, the VA didn't have a lot of money to support them, and so as a family, we did the best that we could.
The Coding for Veterans float joined others this New Year's Day, expanding the program's visibility with a parade broadcast to millions. Jenya Dulo, VOA News, Los Angeles.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.